if we imagine a scenario like this, it's actually not too far from the truth, really,
No,
because
yeah.
the majority of families in Australia, we have a door like this in our home. And if it isn't monitored and watched, the enemy will come right on in, and he will make himself very comfortable in our homes. And we do have an enemy, like I said, who wants to kill, steal, and destroy. And if we're not careful, we can have a doorway into our homes where everything on the outside will come into our home. And then not only just into our home, but into our hearts and into our family members' hearts. And this is a serious thing that we just, like I said, we just can't be complacent about.
Welcome, everyone. Today we are blessed to be joined by Melanie Downs. Not only is she the First Lady of Calvary Chapel in Canberra, ACT, but she is heavily involved in women's ministries. She also facilitates funding for an orphanage that Calvary Chapel has built in India and is a mother of 3 boys. In this conversation, we talk about social media and how to manage it within an apostolic family. It really is insightful. Well, welcome to the podcast, Sister Downs. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you wouldn't mind, just starting out this conversation, sharing a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thank you, Brother Greg, for having me. My name's Melanie Downs. I am married to Jonathan, who is pastoring the church in Canberra. I have 3 boys who are wonderful and keep me very busy.
Yeah, you sell yourself short a little bit. You're also very involved in women's ministries, and then obviously with the orphanage over in India. So you're a very busy lady, and we're grateful for your time here today to talk about this subject.
Thank you.
Now, you were supposed to share this at our most recent general conference, but unfortunately, due to circumstances outside your control, we were unable to do that. And so we thought that this would be a great platform for you to talk about this subject, because we feel like it's very vital to parents of all ages, but also to people without children, to give them some sort of framework that they can look at when they do decide to have children. So if you wouldn't mind setting the platform for what we're going to be discussing here today.
Sure. Thank you. I was asked to speak about social media and the dangers of social media for family. You're right. It's such an important topic to think about. And I do have to say that I am not an expert in this area at all. But I do have children. I'm very passionate about my family and doing everything I can to raise them according to God's word. And I think this is a very timely topic for all of us. Absolutely. And there's no doubt that, we know social media, it affects all of us in our everyday life, and definitely within our families. And we have to be so very careful. There is a statistic, a report was released in February 22, and it said that by the end of 2021, 82.7% of Australia's population were active on social media. So that's just not they had social media. 82% were active on social media. And I think that's just a huge number, and it just reminds us, not that we need any reminder, but how pervasive social media is within our lives. And as far as our family goes, we know that the family is a God-ordained institute, and he has placed every one of us within families, and he's given us as parents the responsibility to raise our children in that nurture and admonition of God. We know throughout the whole Old Testament, there's teaching about how the Israelites were to teach and raise their children. We see how it had to be a part of their everyday life. It was intertwined into everything that they did. And I know we live in a very different world to back in the Old Testament, but there is no difference for us as parents. And maybe even more than ever before, we need to be careful. We need to be deliberate about how we parent our children with love, We have to be involved. We need God's wisdom, and we just cannot be complacent at all. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak on this subject. When I was preparing for this at the end of last year, I did send out a survey to as many young people and parents as I could, just to get a bit of a feel from within our church Australia-wide. And I did get back about 70 surveys. So while I understand that's still a small number as far as a survey goes, it was really helpful. And I will mention some of the things that were brought up within that survey that were really interesting. But some of the things I just wanted to talk about, what our kids are using. From the survey, the young people mentioned that they use TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, Twitch, Twitter, Facebook, WhatsApp, YouTube, Discord, Pinterest, BeReal, Kik, Reddit, and LinkedIn. And, you know, Brother Greg, there's 2 that I actually don't know of in that list. I have to admit, I am a bit of a grandma when it comes to what I use personally. But anyway, we'll go on.
Well, I was impressed that you had BeReal and TikTok on this list, because people of my generation and older, we don't even talk about those ones anymore. But those are the 2 biggest ones for Gen Z right now.
Yes, for sure. Well, I do know of those. I don't use them. I don't know Kik and I don't know Twitch. So they're the 2 I don't know. But what I was surprised at, that nearly all the young people use Facebook. And we as older, myself as an older person than these young ones, you know, get hassled about using Facebook by the younger ones, but they're on it as well. But, you know, the opportunities that come from using social media are just incredible. And I do thank you, Brother Greg. You're amazing in what you are able to do as far as social media and the reach that you have within our organization and out of that as well. So it's amazing what can be done with social media. And I do want to acknowledge that amazing work and all the opportunities that we have as Christians to reach others using social media. And some of those young people in the survey, they mentioned those things. They said some of the positive things about social media was spreading the word of God, gaining knowledge, sharing creative ideas, encouragement in my Christian walk, telling others about the goodness of God, communicating with friends. So, you know, we're aware of how wonderful social media is. And while all of this is so exciting and we really see endless possibilities of what we can do, that's not why I'm talking today. My voice is more of a warning for parents today, and maybe a reminder of what really does need to be heard, because we know there's an enemy who wants nothing more than to weaken and destroy families. And he wants to get into our homes. And, you know, if we could take a moment just to imagine our homes, and that, you know, there's a door that we have in our home that was open. And if we imagine that through that door, anyone could just walk in and start talking to our family, and maybe not just walking in and talking, but staying there, staying around. Imagine if those people came in and they constantly swore and took the Lord's name in vain. Imagine if they told your family that what they owned and what they wore wasn't good enough. Imagine if they came in that door and, you know, they weren't dressed appropriately. They were showing your sons or your husband things they shouldn't see. They were telling your daughters of beauty standards that were just unobtainable. These people coming into our homes, coming and going, whispering lies into our children's ears about who they were and what they should and shouldn't think or do. You know, if we had a door like that in our homes, if we really imagine that, and if we had a door like that in our homes, we would do everything we could to nail up that door and stop those people from coming into our home. And I know a few years ago, we had someone try and break into our home here in Canberra, and we acted fast. You know, we called the police, we had them come, we had different security measures put on, you know, our windows and doors. We changed things straight away because we wanted to protect our family. And if we imagine a scenario like this, it's actually not too far from the truth, really,
No,
because
yeah.
the majority of families in Australia, we have a door like this in our home. And if it isn't monitored and watched, the enemy will come right on in, and he will make himself very comfortable in our homes. And we do have an enemy, like I said, who wants to kill, steal, and destroy. And if we're not careful, we can have a doorway into our homes where everything on the outside will come into our home. And then not only just into our home, but into our hearts and into our family members' hearts. And this is a serious thing that we just,
Yeah.
like I said, we just can't be complacent about.
I I love that illustration because and if you think about it in the context of this conversation where you were talking about how in Jewish culture back all the way in the Old Testament how involved parents were with their children, with their children's lives, they would have never imagined that something like this was even possible.
No.
You know, they had a physical door that they had to protect, whereas this is a door, as you said, these things are real. We sometimes pretend that, oh, because it's online, that's not the real world. No, online is the real world. You're saying 90% of people, I think it was 83% of Australians are active online. That's part of their life. That's the real world.
Yeah.
And so we can't pretend like what happens online is not real. It has effects on our families, on our lives. I love that illustration.
Absolutely. If I could share a beautiful scripture, a real promise. It's in Proverbs 24, verse 3 to 4. It says, through wisdom a house is built, and by understanding it is established. By knowledge the rooms are filled with all precious and pleasant riches. Such a beautiful verse. Through wisdom we build our homes. And I think this just fits right into what we're talking about, because I know I need the wisdom. I need the understanding and knowledge to be able to build my home and take my family and guide them in a way that the rooms of my home are not filled with strangers and all sorts of worldly things, but they are filled with precious and pleasant riches. It's just beautiful. And, the true riches of life, we know that is a good home. It's a great marriage. It's great relationships with our family. That's the blessings of life. And we need to be careful of that open door, because the enemy does not want to bring in precious and pleasant things. He wants to kill, steal, and destroy. But like you said, we can't ignore that our world is changing. We said there's so many positives to social media, but we need the wisdom to how to navigate ourselves and our families through this world that we live in. We need that every step of the way. So, as far as parenting in this age of social media, I know for myself, I have 3 boys. I mentioned my eldest just turned 16. My youngest is almost 13, and my middle is almost 13, and my youngest is 9. So I'm really in the thick of this as far as technology and social media. And I guess for parents of teens, we did not grow up in a world where we had to have this at all. I think it wasn't until I was in university that I started even using the internet, incredible. But our kids from, such a young age are just so used to this digital world. But it just goes to show that how important it is for me as a parent of a teen to keep informed, to educate myself. Another little bit of information I found was that research tells us that by the time the average Australian child reaches their 8th birthday, they've spent the equivalent to 1 full year of their life with digital technologies, which is amazing. Yeah. So our kids are just in this digitally saturated world, everything. And we know with going through the last few years, our kids have had to do online learning. There's no option, for them. Sometimes it's just what they have to do. They have to experience. Right. And as a parent, we have no frame of reference for this. This is all new. How to parent kids in this age, in this time that we live in. As Christian parents, we need this conversation about how we do this. And we do have to take judgment away to be able to have these conversations. We need to be honest with ourselves and, like I said, become more educated. We are definitely going to make mistakes. I've made mistakes before, but we need to move beyond any guilt or shame, and we need to work hard for our families. That's the key. That's what we're doing it for. And Scripture tells us also that we know we become what we behold. And if we behold something for long enough, we will begin to absorb its value. What we behold, we become. Scripture tells us very plainly what it is we are to think about. In Philippians 4 verse 8, whatsoever things are good and true and honest and of good report, think on these things. Our children will become what they behold. And what are we letting them watch and hear? We need to remember, is that voice of God in their lives stronger and louder than the voice and opinions and lies of this world?
Such a good question.
Live, our society is just full of all sorts of things, sensual images, morality, homosexuality is just another lifestyle, adultery, foul language, we know what's out there, but what are we allowing into the hearts of our children and our teens?
Yeah.
Matthew 6:22, it says, the eye is a light for the body. If your eyes are good, your whole body will be full of light. So what enters your eye is what you behold, what you see. And if your eyes are good, your whole body will be full of light. 2 Corinthians 3:18, it says, but we all, with unveiled face, beholding as in a mirror the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from glory to glory, just as by the Spirit of the Lord. So as we behold God and we see him as perfect and wonderful and loving, that will have an effect on us. We know that. As we behold all of that, we become transformed to be more like Jesus. And that is what I want for my family. That's what I want for my boys, to be transformed into the likeness of God and not the likeness of the world. And I want to do everything I can to make sure that that happens. And we know, with all the wonderful things that can be found on social media, it all has things that Christians should not behold as well. And this is where our responsibility as parents come in. We have to be strong and we have to be courageous and at times go against the flow of what is expected for parents to set that standard for our family.
Yeah. The concept of beholding that you set out there is so good, because what you behold is what you become. And you juxtapose beholding God and having your focus and your attention on him to, if you're allowing your children, if you're allowing your teenagers to constantly behold things that are not of God, and then we wonder why they're struggling in their relationship with God. It's because we're allowing them to focus their attention on things that are not of God and things that we've allowed into our homes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I just want to talk a little bit about some more practical things now. Most of us probably will be familiar with the analogy of guardrails in our Christian life. And I love that, the picture and the teaching that we have about placing guardrails in our life. We know when we go, down mountains or on the highways, we have guardrails on the side of the road. And those guardrails are not placed at the point of danger. If I'm going down a mountain, that guardrail is not at the edge of the cliff. It's set back a little bit in a safety area to stop me from going into that dangerous area. And, it's possible and it's necessary for us as parents to put up those guardrails in place to help our children, our preteens, our teens from wandering into those dangerous areas online. So I'd like to go through just a few practical things that they might be common sense to people. Maybe they're just a reminder today. But the first one is just having clear expectations about screen time. we're the parents to help monitor our kids as to how much exposure they have on screens, on social media. Is that time that they spend, is it spent well? You know, like I said, amazing things can happen online, on social media, creating, interacting with peers, problem solving. Or are our kids just sitting there passively consuming video after video as the time goes by? It's, an important thing. Some of these, maybe just personal for me. Families will set up their own things that they have in place. But I think the important thing is that we think about what we want for our family.
Yeah, for sure.
And we put those things in place. For our family, we don't allow devices in bedrooms or at night time. There's no devices kept in rooms overnight time. They're all charged outside of bedrooms. If for some reason, say one of my children are sick or something and they're in their rooms, maybe I'll let them have their device, but the doors aren't closed. It's just little things like that. The majority of work is done out in the open where we all are. There are a lot of monitoring apps that can be used. I've used a couple of different ones. One I have used in the past is called OurPact. These apps are wonderful. They run, and again, I don't know all the technology behind it all, but they run behind the children's devices, and they can you can have access to be able to monitor when the children can access different apps, what times of the day the apps can be taken off. It's very, very, very
Yeah, that's very good. Yeah, that's very handy.
Accountability. I know Accountable to You we use. And, for teens, for adults, this is a wonderful thing to use. I know if you've got, teenage children, maybe you want to ask your pastor to set up an account with Accountable to You with your teen or another trusted adult. And that just, if anything has been searched or looked at the phone, the partner that is set up with Accountable to You will get a notification that something has been accessed. It's just setting up that accountability, which is great.
I use it. Some guys that I mentor have it sent to me along with pastors. So for adults it's great. For teenagers it's even better.
Yes, absolutely. There's also, again, Brother Greg, you could probably tell more about this, but the use of a modem and router. We have a newer modem, and through the modem you can actually turn devices off so they have no access to Wi-Fi at a certain time. That's wonderful, to be able to do that. If you just want to make sure at whatever time at night the Wi-Fi is turned off, that's an easy way to be able to do that. The other thing is, and this is really important, I think, to set up early on with our children, the idea that all devices are co-owned. We all own these devices. And, so if I need to, take my child's device, there's no argument because they have that expectation. They know that devices are co-owned. And this is an important idea to implement as early as possible. Even gifts that are given to kids, yes, they're given to our children, but they're devices for us, and the children are allowed to use them at certain times. For tweens, we let our kids know that technology is something we do together, not just alone, and that's an important thing for all ages, children and adults, because the internet isn't always a great spot for people no matter what age you are. So as far as not hiding anything, not being away alone, doing things by ourselves, we are there together. We shouldn't have to hide anything from people around us. I guess the biggest thing is really go slow with introducing technology to our children. And again, this is for parents with younger children. Don't rush exposing your children to to technology. Don't rush to give them a phone or devices or any kind of social media. Give them the right technology at the right time. And it's not about, being anti-technology or anything like that, but it's just about delaying it. Go slow. I've never ever heard someone say, I really regret that I didn't give my kids social media earlier. No one's going to say that. And really, I've spoken to people and heard very, very sad cases where young teens have been involved in things. And I remember one mum saying to me, it's so hard to close the gate once it's opened. And that phrase really stuck with me. And I thought, we need that reminder, because we can feel pressured as parents,
Oh, for sure.
if other kids, oh, Mum, he has a phone, he has a phone, well, can I get a phone? It's that constant, reminder that all the children are doing something and our kids aren't. But we have to be strong. There is no rush for our kids to have a phone. And as a family, set that in place, set that age, set that time, and so the kids know, and they can they know when they'll be able to use whatever it is, social media.
Do you have a guide? Like, what is it for you guys?
Yeah, well, we I think Lachlan, because Lachlan's our eldest, our eldest son, he did have a phone when he started year 7. Because he was the only one at the high school. And it was, I think one of us got a new phone, so he got, our
You got the old
phone,
one.
and he was able to do that. And it wasn't until year 8 he got some social media. Yeah, so my second son, he's at that age, so he's, reminding us that it's nearly
He's
time.
itching. Yeah.
Almost time
Yeah.
for him.
No, I like your point about go slow. Because I was just thinking back to when you mentioned earlier that I think it was university when you started using the internet more frequently. Well, for me, the big change when I was in high school was social media. Facebook came on the scene. I think I joined when I was a year 11 when I joined. And my parents had they had no clue about it. But back then, you couldn't really use your phone. It was still a desktop. You'd have to go on a computer. But I think my first quote unquote smartphone would have been when I was 16 years old, and it was because I could pay for it. But I think the go slow idea is such a good idea, because I was talking to someone about this. They were saying that their children were bullied at school, and then they were bullied on social media, and they hated social media. And I was thinking about when I was in high school, like when you were at school, and then when you left school, that's it. You were at home, you were at work or whatever, but there was a clear line between school and home. And now, because of social media, the friends that you leave at the schoolyard, they're all online as well. So you're in constant communication with them, and whether that's a positive, relationship or a negative relationship, it doesn't end. And so I think that's another thing to consider for parents when allowing their kids on social media, that maybe it's good to have different spheres of people's lives and not everything is blending together.
Absolutely. Yeah. You think, and our kids, like, they're not at the same development level as an adult. We know our teens, their brains are still developing. And it's important to realize that they, to distinguish that, school and home, and have a safe place where they can just, shut themselves away if need be from negative experiences. They have that opportunity. Even just, I think it was last week, there was a report coming from the US talking about social media and youth mental health. And when I read this, I thought, yeah, sure, I know that. I could have told you that without all the information. But the headline was, kids who get smartphones earlier become adults with worse mental health. And we can see that. We can see the effects, I think, amongst our young people of social media. And that may be that developmentally they're getting too much, too soon.
Yeah, I agree.
So I read something just in the last couple of weeks, so significant. It said you can fence the pool, but you can't fence the ocean. And with all these guardrails that we can put in place, and I know I only just mentioned a few, I'm sure there's others that families do as well. But with all these guardrails, they're age and developmentally appropriate, but our kids aren't going to stay in our home forever. They leave home, they go to friends' homes, they go to families' homes. What about when they're somewhere else and that fence has gone? A pool fence will only protect your pool. As soon as they go to someone else's pool or the river or the beach, there's no fences and they can get into trouble. So with all that we can do with those guardrails, we also have to teach our children to swim. We have to teach them, we have to prepare them and educate them and really be deliberate about instilling godly principles into their lives. Otherwise, they're going to find themselves out there in that deep ocean and they won't have the skills to navigate where they are. And, we're talking about parents, we're talking about families. They need to be the ones that step in and actively teach our children. We cannot leave it to schools. We can't leave it to our kids' peers. And we can't even leave it to our church or our Sunday school. I love Sunday school. I teach Sunday school. I love church. We can do everything we can at church and Sunday school. But that's, 1 hour a week, 2 hours a week. It has to be from the home. The parents need to be educated. We need to educate ourselves so that we can teach our kids. So what do we teach them? First up, and this is a tough one for us, Brother Greg, I think, we have to model the use of appropriate technology and social media. We have to be the ones to give that example. And we've talked about it, too much time on technology, not enough focused attention with our kids, and I really don't want to make people feel guilty because, I understand there's work and there's time when we just need some time out, and that's okay. That's okay. But like I said, we need to be honest with ourselves. Am I spending too much time on social media in front of my kids? What are my kids seeing? And, there was one time in particular, a few years ago, I was taking one of my boys to a band audition. And I know my son, he was really nervous about it. He was auditioning for this band and it was with the school band. And I went in and there were about 6 or 7 other kids in this waiting room sitting with their parents waiting to go in. And I actually my son was next to me, he was all nervous, had his instrument and his music. And I went to take my phone out and I looked around and every single parent was sitting there on their phone. And then I saw all these little nervous children sitting beside them. And I thought, oh, you know what? These kids just need that reassurance right now. So, it just spoke to me. Like sometimes there are times when we just need to be a little bit more aware of what's happening around us, what our kids might need at that very moment. Chat to them, make them feel less nervous about the situation, whatever it is. All right, I've said that.
Oh, that's good.
I don't want to, like I said, I don't want people to feel guilty because there's definitely, times when we just need to do things and that's okay. Yeah. But we just need to have that reminder to sometimes put our phone down.
Well, especially if we're trying to model good behavior. If we're trying to teach them that don't let your world revolve around your iPad or your phone or your devices, but then our world revolves around our iPhone, our iPads, our devices.
Absolutely.
That it's kind of hard to teach your kids to do something that you're not willing to do yourself,
Yeah, for sure. But the other thing, a little bit more positive, is that we need to teach and provide opportunities for our kids to use social media for good. They can use it for outreach and ministry. Even just a couple of weeks ago, a brother at church who does our social media asked my middle son if he would, after Sunday morning service, make the little thumbnails for the YouTube videos for that day. So my son spent Sunday afternoon learning about Canva and learning about how to make thumbnails And so that was a wonderful opportunity for
That's awesome.
him. He loved doing that, and it was doing something really worthwhile and was going to be used at church. So what a great opportunity that was for him. As far as teaching our children, this is a tricky one, but I have learnt more and more we need to talk about the tricky subjects with our kids. There's a lot of things that come up where even as a Christian parent, we don't want to talk about it. We don't want to be able to, we feel like we're giving our kids, too much too soon, but we need to talk about tricky things. One of those is pornography, talking about pornography to our children, obviously age appropriately, but sometimes we have to talk about these things before we actually want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about these things to my children, but I know I have to. I have to teach my kids what it is. I have to teach them how to identify it when they see it and what to do when they see it, because I know they will see things that it isn't good for them to see, even in the shopping centre, walking around, with the advertisements and things like that. But it's really important to bring that out, that conversation out, so that our children feel comfortable to talk to us and know that they don't have to feel that shame that they can't speak to us. I think it's really important. Lots of different just basic biblical principles that we need our kids to know. Do unto others as they would have them do to you. That includes online, in how you talk to people. They might be on a game, chatting to someone online. Talk to that person the way you want people to talk to you. Another one is just be good stewards of our time. Teach our kids, there is time for, fun and games. There's time for work, all of those things. Teach them that the online world is not always the whole story. We get trapped in comparison, unrealistic expectations, envy, jealousy, low self-esteem. We can teach this to our children. Yeah, they hear it at youth, which is wonderful, church, Sunday school, but we need to be that voice as well, talking to our kids. Teaching them about addiction. We know as adults, every time we pick up our phone, the apps that we use are trying to get us to stay longer, engage longer, to use it more often. And, talking about that, what that means, examples of that with our kids is really important. Teaching our kids what to do when they see or hear something inappropriate. Like I mentioned before, we want our children to come to us, to be able to talk to us when they see things. And they might be at school, they might have friends that have different digital rules at home, and we had something recently where one of my son's friends came up and showed him something on their phone, just put it straight in his face. And he said it was a bit blurry, but he could see what it was, and it was something that wasn't very nice at all. And that happens, and I'm grateful that my kids can come and talk to me and let me know when that happens. I'd much rather that than, them feel like they can't talk about that or have to keep it a secret. Maybe one of the biggest things is that I want my children to know that they are loved no matter what. No matter what happens, they will have unconditional love in our home. They'll have that affection. And I will praise them when they do something right. When I ask them to put their device down, if they put it down straight away, I will praise them for that. That's for sure. But, when things go wrong, I'm going to love them as well. When things don't go the way I planned for them to, I'm going to let them know that I love them unconditionally, no matter what. And, children, they want and they need and they expect parents to set clear limits. And this consistency that parents need to have, that is actually what builds trust in kids. And, it can be hard. Consistency can be tough. We know it's important as parents, but it can be a really hard thing to do. But the double side to that is that when we are consistent, when we set our expectations, our children will trust us. We need to be a good listener. When things happen that we don't like, and I do say when, not if, when those things happen, we need to allow time for our children to explain themselves, explain the whole story. Sometimes we jump in too quickly. We have our own emotions and everything to go through. We need to stop. We need good communication with our kids, open and honest. And I know one of my greatest desires is that my boys will feel comfortable enough to come to me when there is trouble, and maybe even when they've made that trouble themselves. You know, if they have been inappropriate with their use, I'm still the parent that loves them and wants to help them through every situation. And this will only happen when they can trust us. Going back to the survey that I did at the end of last year, one of the questions was, if you experience something negative on social media, I think it was, do you have an adult that you can speak to? Most of the young people that filled in the survey, they said they could speak to their parents if something happened to them online, which is wonderful. But there was a handful of kids that said they couldn't speak to their parents, and there were even a few that said they had no one. And even out of that group, you know, the anonymous group, even to have whatever it was, 2 or 3 that said they didn't have anybody, that's a worry. That's a worry for us. That even if it was one young person that thought that, we need to make sure that we have a home where there is open and honest conversation. And we need to be informed. Like I've said throughout, we need to stay up to date. And I constantly feel like I am trying to find out what the latest thing is, learning more and more and more.
That's not just you. I find myself behind nowadays as well.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's quick. Yeah.
Yeah, even at the end of last year when I first prepared for this, you know, thinking about all of the guardrails we have in place, the age restrictions we have on phones, you know, setting up, you know, they can't access things for over, you know, 12-year-olds or whatever. Just as I was doing that, I read that YouTube had changed their recommendation for the use of the app from over 17 plus. They had changed it, they'd lowered it to 12 plus. So without knowing that, if you just have your parental settings on your child's device that you thought was limiting their access, because YouTube changed their age limit, and it wasn't like a big announcement or anything, then the kids were still, they were able to access that if that limit was on their phone. So changes happen all the time, and we just need to constantly be up to date. There is a wonderful a group, they're called Protect Young Eyes. They're from the US, and they are wonderful. They're on Instagram, Facebook, Protect Young Eyes. They are wonderful. He's the man who leads that. He's constantly updating things and giving out information. So I recommend
That's great.
Look to that too. So how do we teach our children? You know what? Discernment. And I fully believe that God's Spirit, when we are praying, God's Spirit will give us discernment in our children's lives. And I know myself, there's been times when, I might just pick up the phone, my kid's phone, and have a little look at it. I wouldn't normally look into, whatever part of it, but then I find something, that's a bit of a concern that I need to talk about. God's Spirit will guide us as parents. We need to have God's wisdom. We need to show grace. We need to be compassionate. But above all, we need to pray for our children like never before. Brother Greg, I just feel really strongly that like we said, this world is completely different to what we grew up with. We need to cover our children with prayer every morning when they head out of our homes into school. We need to just cover them in prayer and ask God to help us, because I know on my own I cannot do this. I can't do it well enough. But I know with God, He's able to step in and do what I can't do. And I'm so grateful that we have God with us in this parenting journey.
That's good.
One last thing, if I could, Brother Greg, one last thing about that. We know the story about David and Goliath. We hear it, from Sunday school. And I think about that story and, King Saul, the king, the army, the older brothers, they were all petrified of Goliath. They couldn't step out of their tent to go and fight him. They just saw this giant and they were petrified. But it took a young boy to come, and that young boy knew God was with him. And I look at that story and I think, sometimes as a parent, as an older person, sometimes I feel like this giant is too big for me to fight. To be honest with you, I feel, God, this is so big. How can I protect my kids? How can I do this? But I think God showed me something that, our kids who have grown up in this world, I don't think they have the same fear as us or the same reluctance to step in and fight. And I pray that this generation, that has grown up with social media, with technology, I think they have a different perspective than us. And I do pray that they're the ones that can stand up. And this giant that maybe we are unsure about, they're the ones that will stand up and fight this giant. And I look forward to seeing what our young people will do, because I think there's great opportunity if they have their parents strong, guiding them every step of the way. Amen. Thank you, Brother Greg.
Yeah, and just further to that illustration, and obviously illustrations break down the further you go, but David, he had to have those times of development, and he had to have those times of relationship with God and experiences before he was able to truly face the giant. And that goes back to the point that you made about, hey, go slow. Our kids, they're going to be different from the world. That's just reality. And there are going to be things that they want to do that maybe they're just not ready for. And so taking that slow approach and gradually allowing them to gain access to these sorts of things, I think is the way to go. This has been such a great conversation. Thank you so much for your time today, for sharing your wisdom with us. Was there anything that you wanted to leave us with as we finish up here today?
I think that's fine, Brother Greg. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I think we all need to keep this conversation happening. As I said, I'm no expert. I'm a parent who's struggling as the next parent to do my best, and we need to be open and just be able to reach out to each other. I think we need each other as parents more than ever before to do it together and to encourage one another.